Good morning, everyone. How are you guys?
How are you?
Doing great, thank you. And thank you for being here, listening to me share my little stuff. So my name is Thompson. For those of you who do not know me, I am an academic and access technologist at University of Washington, Bothell. And I am under IT. And my job entails supporting not only some technologies on campus that we use, have Zoom and Pull Everywhere, Canvas, whatever, right? And then all of the Office 365, or actually Microsoft 365. But the majority of my work has to do with accessibility. I am the accessibility trainer for the campus. I also am part of the software review team, and I review software purchases for accessibility. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about our financial transformation, not too much, just enough to give a little background, and a little bit about our evolving history in the accessibility efforts at UW, and then the part that I do in the software review process. Okay. So I'm going to start with some definitions to make sure I'm not throwing things at you that you go, what in the heck is that? So accessible, it basically means that anyone with a disability can access the same content or same interactions in an equitable manner as someone without a disability and without an accommodation. ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and its 2016 amendments, it's a federal law that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in everyday activities, and there's a major change coming up this year. It's been announced, but it has not been finalized. And when that happens, they're going to tighten up on the requirements on accessibility for all local, state, and federal organizations. IT, when I mention IT, it refers to websites, web-based applications, software system, mobile apps, electronic content, right? So equipment and digital content. So you have documents, images, video, all of those things that are digital. So that's like encompassing all of those, not just my department name. So, and then remediation, which is usually, it means fixing something, right? In accessibility, it means removing the barriers of whatever this thing is and making it accessible. Just a few more. Section 504 is part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and it's another law that protects people with disabilities from discrimination, but it's important to know because it governs any organization that accepts federal funds, and those could be taken away. So next, usability is about creating products that are effective, efficient, and satisfactory to use, and basically promoting a good user experience. And when I do my work, I don't only think about, I'm going to make this accessible for people with disabilities or people who use assistive technologies, but for everyone. I want everyone to have a good experience. VPAT is the Voluntary Product Accessibility Template, and it's basically a document that created by the Information Technology Industry Council, and that is a template that product creators, manufacturers can use to show how accessible their product is. And there's like 4 different types. There's like a 508 version. There's a WCAG, and I'll tell you about WCAG, WCAG in a moment. There's an international that contains all of them, and there's one more that I'm spacing out right now. Anyway, so I usually work with a WCAG version because that's the one our university requires from vendors. And then back to WCAG, WCAG is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And they were created, and they're an international standard, by the way, a part of the Web Accessibility Initiative by the W3C. Those people that, came up with the internet and ran things, So it's a pretty big deal. The current version is 2.2. Our university, as well as many organizations, are still on 2.1. Because there's a lot to do to move to the next version, but that's the one that we're on right now. Okay, so I'll start with a little bit of the history of accessibility. University of Washington has worked on accessibility for over 30 years, but there's something big that happened in 2016. The Office of the CIO for the state of Washington put out a policy for accessibility, Policy 188, where they, for all state agencies, where there's the expectation to provide accessible IT to everyone. I mean, and there are exceptions, and no process is going to be perfect, right? But to get it as accessible as possible. And so they have some important deadlines. By the end of the year, December 31st, there has to be a policy and process in place for compliance for new IT, and then someone named the accessibility coordinator for that organization. Could be a university or state agencies, right? Any of those. The other deadline was March of the following year, where there had to be an accessibility plan in place to also deal and say how we're going to work with existing IT that is not accessible. And also a list of prioritized existing IT with alternative and remediating actions. And by the way, if you have a question, interrupt me. You don't need to wait until the end, okay? Or if I don't make any sense, please ask. Okay. So helpful things happen. We were doing a lot of great work then, but we created the accessibility plan, created an accessibility task force. I've been part of that since the beginning. Also, we created a group called IT Accessibility Liaison. And it's a grounds up type of group where people volunteer to join, learn about accessibility, and help support their areas. And it has been very, very successful. And we hold meetings and training webinars and all kinds of events to help them learn, as well as a network to help each other. Also, we offer professional development and have partnerships with many areas of the campus and even outside entities. And we have come up with some good tools to promote accessibility as well. And we came up also with our own, because it was a requirement, but came up with an accessibility policy, right, to support diversity in our campus, support the non-discriminative and affirmative action executive order, as well as a policy statement for information technology, telecommunications, and networking projects and acquisitions, which involves purchases. So accessibility guidelines based on WCAG 2.1, as I mentioned, and then our policy also was added for procurement, and that was more recent. That was probably, I think around 4 years ago. There was a policy put in place for procurement that supported accessibility in purchasing, in the process of purchasing to hopefully buy and bring in accessible products. Okay. So we're doing all this on accessibility. In the meantime, the university has been doing stuff too with their finances. We had a big mess, right? And it's probably happened in many, many universities. We had a COBOL-based system from 1974. So 800 site systems and 900 integrations with that. What a mess, super decentralized. And it's just a way for, like, say, come on, errors, come on over, let's lose information, right? No continuity. So they decided in 2018 to come up with a collaborative redesign, but it was more than a redesign or an update. It's a completely redo, right? That involved HR and payroll, procurement, and finance processes using the Workday Financial Management tool. And transparency, integrity, and synergy is the tagline for that process. The timeline, so we started in 2018. For the readiness, about a year, 6 months of design, implementation, 42 months. However, there are things still being implemented. As you know, when you implement something brand new and huge, you continue, right? You continue improving it because they're gonna find things that it's like, whoa, we didn't prepare for this. We didn't know, whatever. So, and then last July, it went live, the system. And then that stabilization was for 6 months until the end of last year, but it's still going on, of course, right? And then iterative processes to make it better. So this has helped because it has provided a more centralized way for purchases. So people are connected as they are doing purchases. And and then promoting change management, right? So we are supporting all the business processes. We're not just buying something for the sake of buying it, whether it's technology or something else. Yes. Oh, sorry.
When they were doing that three-part process to build this whole thing in the first place, were you or accessibility a part of that, developing the overall structure?
No, I knew that was going on, but it was like very high up. And then they were developing teams, and it all mainly happened in Seattle. I am on the Bothell campus, so there were feedbacks and focus groups that I participated in. That was the extent of it. Yeah, I had some ideas, but hey. Anyway, so now things are more connected, right? Scope, schedule, and budget. Not perfect, again, but we're working on it. And important is that engaging the right people at the right time in processes is made that more possible, which is wonderful because it was so disconnected before. And focus end-to-end processes, not just the system. And then, as I said, it's an ongoing process to standardize and improve everything and how things go in those processes, okay? So that brings me to talking about the software acquisition and support at my campus. So we offer in IT, we offer consultations to help faculty or staff, help them find the right solution for what they need. Because a lot of times it's like, have you ever seen, it's like somebody comes to my conference like, oh, we need to buy this thing. Right? Shiny object. And it could be a president, it could be, a chancellor. It's like, whoa, what are we going to do there? So this helps bring in and explore not only what they're looking for, see if we have something already in place that may meet their needs, and then trying to research it before we go into the procurement process itself. And then we can always recommend alternative solutions, right? We have UWare, which is a system that contains a lot of low-cost or free software for the campus that are already approved. And so there are a lot of options in there. But then again, a lot of times not all the needs are met, and we need something else. So that's why we need to look into it. Yes?
Concerning your UWare purchases, is that site publicly facing, or is it behind a login that's protected to prevent cybersecurity vulnerabilities or bad actors to exploit the software?
Good question. I linked it here so I can show you. Oh, that's loading. I'm gonna get some coffee. Yeah. It's taking a little bit. Okay. I'm gonna let it run for a minute and go back in here and
Please stop it. It's not loading.
It's thinking at the top.
It is?
Yeah, it's spinning it for a minute.
yeah. Where's my little thingy? Right there.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we'll check it in just a minute and see if it's loaded. I tested it last night because I thought you might ask, and I opened it up in an incognito window, and it opened up without a login.
Okay, that answers.
So, but the thing is, if you want to go into it, that's when it requires a login, right? But you can see the list, yeah.
Okay.
So, right. So anyway, so we have those, and then also if we have third-party purchases or renewals, so we have a third party because again, not all the needs might be met, right? So let's explore, see what we can find. But there are also existing contracts that were never reviewed, that have been there for a while. So we need to review those to comply with our new policies. And all of the purchases must meet data privacy, security, and accessibility standards that we set for the university, and then as well as our procurement policy. And yes, and we negotiate to a point because we have a contract and we have some writers that they can view, and then we allow a little bit of flexibility to put things, to fixes in on their roadmap, and they have to provide that. But if it does compromise any of those, we won't purchase it. So usually software with anything with high risk factors, they will take longer to review, of course, and that's usually like if it requires accounts, if it stores data, not on the campus but on the cloud, on their systems, right? If students will be using it, that's another high risk. So those things take much longer to review. And so we have announced initially, we need to change this because it says that generally takes 3 weeks to 3 months for the process. It was much longer because you run into things, right? We have to go sometimes back to the requester and ask questions, clarification, because perhaps what they submitted in the software request form is not clear or is non-existent, right? And we need to know those things to move forward. Sometimes we need to engage with a vendor, and maybe they're not responding. And there's one thing that's happened quite often is that sometimes they don't respond for a very long time, and towards the end, where they figure that, oh, they're going to buy it, they go, oh, by the way, yes, this and this and this, and by the way, we don't accept this term and that term and that term. So we have to negotiate that and talk through and look at what they're saying no to, what they're redlining. So anyway, another thing that affects the length is we have many departments involved. So we have the requester, we have the vendor. In the university, we have IT, we have several people in the software review, we have our interim CIO, we have our vice chancellor who does the approvals, and we have 3 different departments that do the financial. We have the fiscal and audit services on campus, and then we have 2 other processes, offices at the Seattle campus that have to participate in all this to close the loop. Okay, so usually the process is the user submits the software request form, and that is assigned to a ticket automatically. We use ServiceNow. How many of you use ServiceNow? A few here. Okay. That's the one that we adopted centrally. Then once it's assigned to a ticket, then it's assigned to a person. Usually in our team is Marissa, and she starts evaluating different tasks. And then she meets with our interim CIO to see, hey, what are some things that jump out at you that we need to address first, right? And she creates some tasks for different people in the team or some other people for inquiry, for evaluation, etc. And then the request is added to the weekly software review meetings. I've been part of the process for 3 years now, but I've been part of the team officially for about 6 months. And in those 6 months, we've gone from a list of 30 requests pending. Now we're down to like 12. Like, oh my gosh. And then trying to remember, it's like, okay, and then keep a list going, right? And then it's like, we talk about it and I write notes and everything. It's like, oh, was it that request? Was it this task? Was it that person? It's just, so we have to spend a lot of time trying to figure it out and get it right to keep things moving. So then the tasks are reviewed for completeness and initial risk, right? That's reviewed several times. We can say initially, like right away things jump out, oh, students will be using it. Oh, they need account information. Oh, they're going to store data. So those things, right? And then evaluation is done in the data privacy, security, and accessibility. And the accessibility is always assigned to me. And then data privacy is done by both our security officer as well as our systems manager. And then, but we all review them to make sure things make sense. And especially because even if we produce a lot of information and reports, we have to come up with a one-pager for our vice chancellor who does the approvals with our recommendations, right? because he wants to know what he needs to know to say yay or nay, right? And man, that can be hard. My reports tend to be several pages long when I do a full review. It's hard. So anyway, and then this is ongoing and it's iterative, right? We may go back because we're missing something, or we need to check, or we find out new information and we need to go back and check. So that takes a lot of time to do that. Okay, so then assessments are reviewed to risk analysis, to the risk analysis document that I mentioned, the one pager. And then we need to create, well, not create, but we need to understand the use case scenarios for the use of the tools or the software that's being asked for. Then we send that to the requester, and we have to check all of the tickets related and anything related to that request, because a lot of times the requester is not the user. It could be a program coordinator or an administrator, right, that's doing that. So we need to make sure and check with them that the use case scenarios are verified. And in some cases, they're going, oh, only one person is going to use it, and they're going to use only this piece of the software, and that's it. So we tell them, if that changes, if you decide to use other modules, if other people included, one have to run the review again, because it's no longer valid for what we approved. So then when everything is ready, then it's assigned to the fiscal and audit services, who do a lot of checking and do checking with the vendor. They may work with Seattle if the vendor needs to be approved, because it's not one that's already been approved in our system, and do that kind of thing and verify and check whether there are other contracts under this company for that product. And then there's always an effort trying to centralize, because sometimes we have this school and that school and this department, that department, they may have different licenses for the same product, and we can only manage it better, but it saves us money if we do one contract for all. For the most part, that's the case. So then after it goes through that, the request is sent to our VP of Administration and Planning to approve. If approved, it's forwarded to the main campus procurement office to finalize, and another fiscal office. Sometimes they get involved. One thing that we've been encountering, I think I mentioned it in another slide, but I'll mention it real quick, is that we're getting more and more very complex contracts with sub-processors. Have you seen any of those? They're becoming popular. So the main contract has, here are the VPADs, here, the writer and this writer we're approving, but then we look down and it turns out that we need to also work with the individual subcontractors, because there are some other things happening that did not come up in the main contract, right? So it takes a lot of time trying to figure those out. So we continue iteratively to try to do the best we can and get information correct before we process and pass it forward. So again, areas that we should check: data, security, and accessibility. Those are the main. Depending on the tool, the software, or the areas, we have a whole page of documentation that can go, and I'm sure in your institutions you do as well, with add-ons to the contract and policies and things like that. Let me check, this is sad.
That's right, I got it.
Did you? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't know why it's not coming here. So.
Hey, Anna.
Yes.
Maybe you'll address this in a bit, but have you had to say no to people?
Yes.
And so what were the triggers? What were the usual triggers for that no?
Bless you.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay. So triggers. So high risk, right? If we find out that initially the case scenario is no, it's not for students, and it's like, oh yeah, we have 2 students that are going to be involved in a project, and they're not employees, right? Because student employees are a little bit different. They still require additional protections for employees, but not as students working in a project, right, for the courses. So there's that, or when we find out later, especially in those complex ones where there's additional security data that was not revealed initially. One thing that comes up after we go through the whole process and it goes to Seattle comes back, it's like, we kind of red flag this company. Another one is, so if more than one person, two people, and there's students involved, if it's completely inaccessible, right? If students are going to use it, and then, and the thing is, not everything is going to be 100% accessible. There are many things that are very visual. So someone with vision deficiencies of any kind might not do well. So they might not be able to participate and use it, right? But if it makes it so it is very inaccessible and there's no way around it, and it cannot be required. You have to provide an accommodation, you have to provide another option, right? So we have those conversations if it's a faculty member, right? If it's a staff, like for example, an advisor, and then there happen to be a little gap in security. And it's like, and where's this information going between here and here? Oh, I just download it, and then it lives over here, and it's like, is that password protected? Oh, I just click on here, and it's like, oh my gosh, right? So anyway, so there are many things that come up, and we try not to say no. We try to work through and work with the vendor and work with the requester to make it happen if it's possible, as long as it doesn't violate any big requirements, right? Yeah, so these are the three documents. The UW terms and conditions page is the one that I mentioned that has a ton, and I don't know if it'll open, but, oh, I did, yay. Okay, so, no. Go back, okay. So see, there's all this stuff. This is just our own. And so our main ones are the data processing agreement, that's the data and privacy one. And then we have the IT security terms writer, that's our security one. And then we have the accessibility one somewhere floating in here. Oh, okay, thank you, right there. And I helped update version 1.2. Oh, that one. But that's where it goes, and they basically look like, for example, if we're to open one of them, let's open the accessibility writer, for example. Yeah, publicly is a PDF, but we have a Word version. That's the one we shared with the vendors that can do so. So it basically just goes through some of the the contracting legalese, right, around it, having them acknowledge that their product's accessible, or they're going to make it accessible. They're going to provide a roadmap of those things, the standard of care, that it has to comply with our guidelines, University of Washington IT guidelines, which are based on WCAG 2.1. And I've had one company redline that's like, no, we want to go with accessibility standards. We want to go with the 508. It's like, no, sorry. And it's kind of funny because sometimes I'm going, oh, I'm just this little person here doing this, right? And all this other bigger people on the Seattle campus. But we consult off and on with our attorneys at the university. And one instance, I have been pushing back because I said, hey, your software is doing this and this and this, and this is not accessible. And I said, we'll hack this and we'll hack that. And this software engineer replied and says, well, WCAG was not made for apps, so it doesn't apply. And I'm going, what? So it does. It's anything. It doesn't say, oh, and mobile applications, but it's included. It's part of it. It's been included since earlier versions because it's all part of the internet. It's all part of the web. And so I send them a response, and then no response from them. So I share my my trepidations, and then it was passed on to our fiscal office in Seattle, and they contacted our GA, and so he reviewed it and came back. He's like, Anna's right. That's never happened before. It's usually, oh, no, you need to do it this way, but it just made me feel so good. So anyway, but yeah, so they kind of look like that, and these are available. As you can see, I just were able to open it. When I share the slides with you, you can check them out. We've been doing this kind of work for a long time. And then, of course, the security one and the data one a little bit different. So just looking at the security terms writer. Yeah, open. Okay, so, we have the legalese, we have some definitions. Come on. Okay. I'll drag you down there. It doesn't want to come down. Anyway, there we go. Now it's coming down. Okay. So yeah, security, we talk about malicious code, Trojans, university data, etc. You probably have heard this, this terminology, incidents, and what are they going to do, right? What are the ways they address issues if they happen? Because sometimes they do happen, even with the best of security in place. But we need to make sure that there are sound protections in place initially, right? A standard of care, etc. So it goes on and on like that. Okay. So those three are linked, but you're welcome to check those out, download them if you want, and see what we use. Okay. So when I come in the process, there are different types, and this is very generalized because there are all kinds of different shapes and sizes and ways depending on the situation. But in general, we have like a low, medium, and high type of level assessment depending on the risk and the software and different things. So like, for example, low one is software that may have partial approval already, and perhaps it's only being used internally by a few people. And then when we check the security and data privacy, then there are no red flags, so that will be really light, right? I just go through and I do some really basic, and I'll show you that in upcoming slide. Then a medium one, where we have more people using it. It's not just a couple people, maybe even student employees, right? And then the contract is a what we expect of a contract. It's not a complex one with a bunch of other pieces and other apps and other companies included. And then that the vendor agrees with the accessibility right. It's not redlined. That makes the process much, much easier. And then one thing that makes the process easier too for me is that if they have a VPAT in the first place. Okay, and I will show you an example of a VPAT in a little bit too. Because it tells me, it's like, okay, they made an effort, but I still have to check it out because the VPAT is not complete 100% truth. It's not a guarantee that the product is accessible. It's a conversation starter because they got to show not only, yes, it satisfies this standard, that success criteria, but how did you test it? How do you know it meets that or not? Then you have the high, right? Usually when students are involved, something that's publicly available, or the vendor redlines the accessibility writer, the contract has subcontractors. Those are so complex, yeah. So like the last one I worked in that has subcontractors, the whole process from beginning to end took a year and a half. I didn't come in at the beginning, right? I came in like the last 6 months in the process, but a year and a half. But it was a big package software for student enrollment. So it's a huge one. Okay, so a basic evaluation process, some of the things I check. Hopefully they have a VPAT. I always try to request if I can get in touch with them. And these are some of the main areas. And they're all linked to the specific criteria of WCAG, but I check if the images have alt text, right? If there's video, if they have captions, or if there's audio, if there's a transcript, that sort of thing. Check for headings. And if they have headings, are they used in order? They're not going from heading 3 to heading 5 all of a sudden. So that sort of thing, right? I also check color contrast, and that's more an earlier check. I just put it down on the list because of the numerical place, but I check that, make sure there's enough contrast between the foreground and the background, so most people can read it. And also the use of color, right? Are they using color alone for information? It's like red fields are required. What if a person has some color blindness? They might not be able to tell that that's a red field. Yes?
What are the accessibility implications of headings? I'm a little bit naive in this area.
Oh, no, sure. So headings provide structure for content. And so for anyone, it creates very structured, consistent formatting. But for a user of assistive technology, specifically a screen reader user, the same way, if you look at content and you see a bunch of headings, usually, I tend to, people look at things differently, but I look at the headings and then I go and read the one I want, right? So that way you can select. Use of assistive technology can put a command, can do an H on the keyboard and pull the list of headings on the document. But if it doesn't have headings, it's all a big block of text, right? A bunch of paragraphs. So they have to read the whole thing. And then allows them to go from one or the other. So, yeah.
Can I just add a clarification?
Yeah.
So it's not, it doesn't work if they have a heading where they just bolded and underlined it.
Yes.
It has to use the actual heading
In the settings, yeah.
in the settings.
Yes,
That's
thank
the
you.
metadata.
Yes, that's the metadata, exactly. That's
Otherwise, the screen reader just says bold underlined and then reads it. It doesn't tell you
Yeah,
it's a heading.
right. And as a matter of fact, yeah, that's a really good point. As a matter of fact, it will let them know if something is bold or underlined or italics if that option is turned on in the screen reader, because it's not turned on by default. But yes, it has to have that style applied, right? So the actual heading, it has to be in the code H1, H2, or if you're creating, for example, in Word, where you apply the style for that heading. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for bringing that. I appreciate it. Okay, so yeah, and then I test the navigation with a keyboard. Very simple. I do tabs, I do different key combinations, I do the arrows, and then see how I can navigate. If I absolutely have to use the mouse, right? If I absolutely have to use the mouse, then it's like, whoa, okay. There's a little bit of a showstopper, but not necessarily no, right? So, but it's not a quick test that I do. And this one, the last one here, I list is very important because if there's any flashing content, like more than 3 flashes per second, or similar type of flashes for people who have visual sensitivity, it could go all the way to, it could cause a seizure for someone. So I have to be very careful with that.
Question on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the ability to, moving backgrounds and videos kind of thing, being able to pause that movement or just not having movement altogether?
Oh, good. That's a good question. So whenever you have, sometimes things load and start just running, there should always be a way to stop it. That's a success criteria requirement. Yes. And then, so any sort of animations, because it could be distracting. For someone in the spectrum, that is like horrible. It's so distracting that it might completely throw them off. But like specifically for the flashing content, it's just flashing more than 3 flashes per second. Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah.
Just a quick heads up, you have 5-ish minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so the medium. So review the full VPAT. Hopefully there's a VPAT. I should put hopefully there. And I test for all the WCAG success criteria. And there are 3 levels of criteria. There's the A, AA, and AAA. A is the basic ones, like you must comply. AA is like middle of the road, and that's the one we require at University of Washington and most places. And AAA is like pie in the sky. It'd be nice, it'd be great if it meets that, but it doesn't have to meet it. So, and if there is a mobile app, I do basic tests with the screen reader in the mobile app itself. I have an Android phone and I have an iPhone that I do the testing with for both. And that's just the medium, so just some basic testing. But then if it's a high, right, I do everything in the medium, and in addition to that, I do the full web testing with using automated tools and manual checks. I have several tools on my browser that I do, like web developer tools as an accessibility area. I use the Axe tool and I really liked it, but I don't want to pay for it. So I'm using other tools that are made, and then I follow up with manual checks because it always requires a human to check things thoroughly. So if it's an app, I evaluate it with Xcode on my Mac and for the iOS version of it, but it always reveals certain things that may show up in the Android versions as well. I test several use cases, and then I run testing with the NVDA screen reader, which is similar to JAWS, but it's free. So I do a lot of this testing in Windows. I use Parallels, and I'm running Windows 11 on that. So I can do full testing because my main computer is a Mac. So what else do I do? So I test the completeness and accessibility of VPAT. It never ceases to amaze me. One of the requirements of a VPAT is that itself, the document has to be accessible. Most of the time it's not. Yeah, so I always provide a report when that's the case. So I'm very big in user experience. I want to make sure that any user has a good experience. Is this tool effective? Is it efficient? Does it make you feel good when you use them, when you figure it out, right? Is it not frustrating? Does it have consistent navigation? The ways that you access the content and navigate, are they logical? Do they make sense? And if once you figure it out, do you have to keep on figuring out when you go to the next layer or to the next page? Or are things consistent, right? So things like that. Okay, and we're towards the end here. So the VPAT document template. Oh, that's on the one on the web. Let me go to the folder so we don't have to wait. So this here is the latest version of the WCAG VPAT, and it has all kinds of instructions. There we go. Okay, it has guidelines. It has all kinds of instructions how to fill it out. There are certain sections that should never be deleted, and many users, they delete because they're like, oh, we don't need all that. There are certain sections that should remain. Things that are required, for example, are the testing method who is the accessibility content. The accessibility content is required whether that was a consultant or someone internal to the company. And then, so it goes through a bunch of instructions, the first part. But the meat of it, best practices, Okay, here you go. So here the main pieces, right? This is the actual document. And then, so name of the product, report date, description, contact information. And the contact information is the person who's responsible for this, who has the information or who to contact with questions about this. Any notes, evaluation methods are important. How did you test it? Did you use a screen reader, right? Or did you just look at it like, oh, it looks, just by knowing what's behind the scenes, it looks like it could be accessible, could do that, right?
Companies work for it.
I know, right? Exactly. So yeah, and then the standard, all of the standards, WCAG standards, I follow this in a table, right? And then it shows all the that last column, it shows the different levels. If it meets, yes, no, and then it has a link so you can go to it. And the thing is, you can go, if you don't need to test for 2.0, if we're testing for 2.1, because that's the one we require, you don't have to do both. But if your company has done it for 2.2, that's great. We'll go with that. There are just a few additions to the latest version, okay? And then the terms and an export, and here's the actual table. They enter the information, conformance level. Does it meet, that does not meet, partially meet, right? Not applicable, that sort of thing. And then they have to explain. And it surprises me sometimes, like remarks and explanations is empty. It's like, how can you say yes on something that is, it requires, you need to let me know how you did this. So this is the template that is linked on from their website on the slides. And then let me just show you real quick. So just some examples of a VPad from a company. Are you familiar with Canva? Yeah, see? And Canva, they have a publicly available VPad, which is amazing. And and
So many of the slides are so inaccessible.
yes, well, yeah, I know, right? They have a lot of work to do because they were not thinking about accessibility from the get-go. Okay, Vengage is a similar company, and they built everything with accessibility from the start. And it's similar to Canva, but it's a little bit more money, and doesn't have as many options available in the free version. But yeah, they're working on it, and I'm glad they are. But yeah, they have a ways to go. Absolutely. And then the other thing is, you download a PDF from Canva. Yeah, they turn on the tags, but the tags are a mess in a PDF. You have to do major remediation. Okay, so and then a couple of examples of reports that I've done. Okay, let me go. So this is an example here. I won't be sharing that with you. I'm just going to show you. So this is one of those risk analysis one pagers I was talking about. This is for the ISSUU. Does anyone know how to pronounce that? I've never heard anyone say it. Issue. I call it issue. I mean, so every time I say, okay, you're like ISSUU, because I don't know how to say that. But it's just, we always say describe the tool, what it is, so that way our vice chancellor is aware what kind of tool it is. And then we have little bits of information about privacy, define our findings on privacy data, security, and then accessibility. So try to make it short and sweet. Usually my name is around there somewhere. It's like, hey, connect with Anna Thompson. Anna recommends this or that for training, etc. Right? And in this case, for them to use this, one of the requirements is that they get PDF remediation training. Because if they upload an accessible PDF to that, and you know what Isuzu is, it's whatever this is called. You know what that software does, right? That tool? It has those virtual magazines that look really cool. Anyway, if you upload an accessible PDF and you allow downloads, that downloads the same file. It's going to be accessible. So that's why that's important. Okay, then one more. Let's see. Oh, two more. I know I'm over. The last person was over too. Okay. Okay, and real quick. So this is real quick. This is an accessibility assessment for Geocache. Is from a Seattle company. It's an app, and so I did a full assessment on that, and what technologies I used, areas evaluated, and findings. So I went through every single area of the app and found issues and behaviors. And I did run it through Xcode as well. But what are the actions? What happens when you do this? What happens when you do that? Right? And is that accessible or not? That sort of thing. And then I always have conclusions and recommendations. And then I did this as an appendix, the WCAG standards as a reference. And then the last one that I wanted to show you was CodePen. Are you familiar with CodePen? You are, huh? It's an awesome programming tool that's web-based, and you can use it for free. And you can learn how to program and put up projects, and people share projects. It's amazing. So we had a request for that because an instructor wanted to use it in computer science. So I had a lot of fun testing that. So I did that, and then so I go through, I analyze the VPAD they offer. I give some information, the tools that I used for the accessibility testing, what the tool is, conclusions, recommendations, and then I go through all of the different success criteria for WCAG, and then I just talk about it, whether supports or not, and comments about it. So that's it. Thank you. And do you guys have any questions or anything else pending? Yes. Who was first? Oh, okay.
Okay. So we have a situation on campus where people don't like to request the software. They like to buy it on their P card. And it goes by all of this process. So have you figured out a way to either audit any retroactively purchased products by departments, or have you figured out a way to flag any purchases like that through a P card so that it can go through the correct process?
We're still trying.
Okay.
But I mean, we're doing a lot of communication campaigns, and then the word keeps on getting around that those reviews are necessary. So we're having, for whatever reason, a lot less of those, which is good. We're trying to inform our campus about how important it is to review, because something might look really cool, it seems like meets your needs, but there might be issues with it, and it's good to know, because we don't want any harm to come to anyone, right? Yes, so we're working on it.
Awesome.
Yes, an ongoing
What we
thing.
did with that was our purchasing department, any kind of software or any kind of technology automatically has IT on as a signer. And so if they haven't done the paperwork,
Mhm.
they don't get pulled.
I love that.
Awesome.
I wish we could make that happen.
I don't know if everybody else uses for their state purchasing, that's what we use. But yeah, it doesn't get past IT. If you haven't done the work, you don't get the toy.
Oh, awesome. I'm gonna bring it up and see if that's a possibility, something like that. Yes.
Question.
Yeah.
My question is, so are you mostly doing this in isolation at UW? Like, do you have a team helping you, or are you coordinating with other four-year universities?
So I have a strong relationship with the Accessibility Technology Service on campus, Central IT. And I mean, we're friends, and they help me out. I have questions. I find really weird situations, and I go, okay, I've never seen this before, and they help me out. So I have a strong connection with them, and they help me. And then I share out some of my reports that they use for training their own student employees
So
for
the reason
accessibility.
I ask is
Yeah.
I'm in the community technical college system of
Uh-huh.
Washington. And
Yeah.
so we're all networked, so I work with 33 other colleges, and we have a committee for accessible technology.
Yeah.
So we have an accessible policy coordinator provided by the
Yes.
state board. So, and they have a lot of resources posted. If anybody wants to look at their website, it's CAT.Cato, at the state board for community technical colleges in Washington.
Yeah.
But so we're developing like a similar thing to your UW purchases, where
Mhm.
we kind of work together to review software and say, okay, these are things that we vetted, but it still feels like we're duplicating work that's happening at
Yes.
every other university.
Yeah, but the colleges have an amazing system with that, because it's centralized through that one office, and there's a lot of sharing, and a lot of less duplication for one thing. But like at my campus, I'm the only one that I have a certification. I'm working on another one, but I'm continuing learning, and I train people, and I'm hoping it's like eventually maybe some helpers they leave. So I kind of work alone, right? But I have a lot of support from the Seattle campus. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I think that's something that is, at least as a state of Washington, we could do better at partnering.
Yeah, I know.
Because we're doing the same work, we're operating under the same laws.
Hmm. Absolutely, I agree. Yes, bless
Well,
you.
And to right along with what he's saying, if you were updating, or I'm sorry, if you were determining the accessibility of a product like Zoom that was updating every
Mhm.
week
Hmm.
or every other week during the pandemic, that'd be your full-time job.
Yeah, yeah. And we partner with Zoom. I mean, it was nothing like because we needed it was purchased, but after the fact, Zoom has been very responsive in working with our accessible technologies team. And so they're partners with them, they're partners with Google, but Google's not responsive, they just do their own thing. Microsoft is really responsive, as well as we find we have lots of users using Articulate products, and as of the last 2 years, they have been very responsive in working with us and fixing bugs.
But do you have to re-evaluate the updates, the significant updates that have new features,
No, unless they're glaring issues, because there are some people who oversee those updates, right? I know they come out automatically quite often, but there's a team specifically in IT at Seattle that verifies those and looks for all the bugs and improvements, bug fixes and improvements, to make sure there's nothing really weird or negative in there. And if there is, they just centrally remove that update. Yeah.
We're 4 minutes to the next presentation.
Yes, I gotta go.
Thank you.
You guys gotta go. Thank you so much.